back to the Keeping the Dream Alive podcast. Today, I have a familiar face back on the podcast, Cindy Walz, CFO here at Torch Technologies, Freedom Real Estate, and so many more. On the past episode, we talked a little bit about vesting and diversification, but today the conversation is going to talk a little bit more about allocations, distributions, and share price. ESOPs are kind of known for their ability to grow long-term wealth. Talk a little bit about how this works.
Okay, so it works very similar to, investing. So if you buy a share of stock today and you invest $1,000, $10,000, whatever you have, with an average return of 10% in 7 years, it'll double. And then that doubling of the double and growth builds wealth and leads you down a path towards retirement and the ability to retire. So that's kind of what the ESOP does. Most investors and advisors and all of those guys will tell you need to be investing X percent of your income every single month, every single year, so that you can build your retirement wealth. The beauty of an ESOP is that the company is helping. So the company contributes and you contribute. So it's kind of like a partnership and a pairing there. So instead of you getting to retirement on your own, the company and your efforts supporting the company are generating the ability for the company to contribute for you. And so over time, that account builds. Company puts their funds in, you put your funds in, and over time, that account grows and builds wealth for you as an individual.
Yeah. And so do employees, I feel like sometimes as new employees are coming in that maybe aren't familiar with an ESOP, it's hard for them to understand them contributing. They understand like, hey, the company's doing that. So does that happen even if they don't does the company, does Torch continue to invest into the ESOP and create value for the employees without the employees necessarily having to put it in? Or is it kind of a collaborative nature?
Yeah, it's the company for the ESOP on the ESOP side, the company puts the funds in for you. So as long as the company's growing and the value of the company is expanding, then the company is putting a contribution into your account for you. And there's really no obligation on your part to do anything with that. The company's just going to contribute X percent into your account. Now, there are benefits to you for paying attention to that because there's a way you can expand your contribution. If you put 3% into your 401k and you do that, then the company will give you an additional 3% into the ESOP as a match to your 401k. So there are ways that you can actively participate and ensure that your ESOP grows at a faster rate.
Talk a little bit about what is an annual allocation and how does this determined?
Okay, so annual allocation, we call it contribution. So that is a situation where the company makes a decision, partnering with the board of directors, as to what the contribution into the ESOP account is going to be this year. And that's decided annually by the board and executive management. And so that's calculated based on your eligible compensation. Let's say they decide it's going to be 9%. Then they take your eligible compensation and what you made from the company on an annual basis. They calculate it times 9%. And that becomes the contribution that the company puts into your account. And those become very real dollars that come into your account. What do you do with those? You can take those dollars and you can buy company stock. And so as your stock grows in your account and the stock price of the company grows in your account, you're kind of growing two ways. You're growing by the contribution going in and you're buying more stock, new stock, but you're also getting the growth on the stock as it grows and expands year over year. So you have two ways for your account to grow.
Talk a little bit about kind of what share price is and what affects the share price as any company, even if it's a public or an ESOP company. Share price is a conversation that people mostly have. What affects maybe an ESOP differently than maybe what affects a public company, and kind of what affects Torches maybe more than others?
Okay. So, most people are familiar with share prices and stock price. Most people are following the exchanges and they know what that looks like. There's a lot of publicly traded companies. The interesting thing and what is different about an ESOP company versus a publicly traded company is that the stock price for a publicly traded company is out on the exchange. So it is subject to market pressures. When there's high demand, lots of shares are sold. When there's not high demand, then the stock price is not sold. And the company, at the end of the day, the share price of a company is indicative of the worth of the company. What is the value of that company? If you take all of the shares of the company and multiply it times the stock price, that becomes the value that they market and consumers and investors think that that company is worth. On the ESOP side, we're not publicly traded, so there is no market for our stock. So how do we do that? How do we get a share price? Every year, our trustee, the ESOP is owned by a trustee. The trustee hires a valuation firm. It's a third-party valuation firm to come in, look at all of our details. They look at the financials, they look at the business plan, they look at the strategic plan, they look at the pipeline, they look at everything that comprises the company. How many clearances do we have? I mean, it's a full range of attributes of the company that they look at and explore. And they use all of that to calculate a share price. And then that share price is set for a year, and that becomes the share price that that the employees see in their statements.
And so, as having that third party kind of acts as an unbiased sort of role. It's not somebody internally saying, "Hey, we did these things really great. We should have a higher share price than maybe we had before." But like over the years, I would assume that the share prices continue to grow as Torch has continued to grow. Is that how much of a obviously there's so many different factors that kind of contribute to what that looks like. And it's interesting just to think about how, year over year, though, the changes for the employee might not be drastic, but, the long-term goal that the company has is being able to be achieved based on what happened that particular year. Kind of moving into talking a little bit about distribution. How does this work, and what is distribution, and kind of what does it look like for the ESOP as a whole, and then what does it look like for the employees?
Okay, so distribution is what happens at the end. When I get ready to retire and I'm leaving the company, how do I see those funds in my statement and I'm looking at it. How do I get those funds so that I can go use those in retirement? That's called a distribution. Also, if you terminate from the company, there's a distribution of your funds. As you leave the company, you leave the ESOP, and there will be a distribution of your funds. And that is decided by a distribution policy that we publish every year. How are those funds going to be distributed? And so that's what distribution is all about. So when you get ready to leave, you're looking at your account and you're going, okay, what happens now? I've left. There's a piece of paper. I see my account. I see those dollars. I want to travel to Europe, whatever. So we do a distribution. So the company buys all of your shares back, converting your shares to cash. That cash is then transferable. You can roll that from your ESOP into a 401k or into an IRA or into any other investment account that you select and you choose. And that cash follows you into retirement and wherever you go. And that's a distribution. Distributions happen annually. They only happen one time a year. And they are usually in like around the May timeframe of every year after we have done the valuation that we talked about earlier, after we've established a stock price, we've generated statements so everybody knows what their new value in the company looks like. And then a distribution will occur for those individuals that have either left the company or retired.
And so, the distribution value can vary depending on employee to employee, how long the employee's been here. The distribution can be substantially more than what an employee looks like that's maybe been here 5 or 6 years. On your end, how do you kind of plan for stuff like this? Because there's a lot of employees that maybe have been here the whole time, been here 20 plus years, and maybe you're getting ready to retire. Is that something that y'all are looking at forecasting, years in advance, thinking like, hey, probably in 2025, we're going to see a lot more of the, 15 to 20 year plus employees retiring, and like planning for what that distribution looks like?
Yeah, that is one thing beautiful about working for an engineering services company, but also something beautiful about working in a company where our co-founders decided early on we're going to be an ESOP. And then becoming students of ESOP to understand, okay, what does that mean? And what are the downstream ramifications of that? What do we have to prepare for? Planning and a beautifully executed plan is always a positive. And so you can see from the early days of Don and Bill Rourke forming the company that they thought about that. Downstream. We're sitting in Freedom Real Estate and Capital as an example, right? We have, almost $150 million of assets sitting here being managed by the company. And so we do not take it lightly. We plan. We're always looking 5 years into the future. We're not working on the current year. We're working 5 years out. And so we run something called a repurchase liability study. So every year we run that two ways. We run it externally with Principal, who's our record keeper for the ESOP. We have them run it for us using all of our data, all of our employees' demographics. And then we also run one internally. And then we compare the two to see how we're doing. But that gives us a profile. It gives us a look at 5 years into the future. What is that distribution going to look like? What is that repurchase commitment going to look like? How many accounts are we going to have to convert into cash? And what is the size of that? And that gives us, 5 years to plan. Okay, how are we going to handle it? What are we going to do? What is the plan of attack for that year? So that's kind of how we handle it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. I think, conversations like this help the employees that maybe have just started kind of understand it. Maybe employees that have been here for a few years understand it. And I think using this as a tool for you, that if you're a new employee, listening to this tool or being a part of some of the different classes and stuff like that Torch has, that kind of helps you understand what an ESOP is, because not every ESOP's the same and not every company is an ESOP. And so being able to understand kind of what Torch is and kind of what the ESOP is here is important for you. But I appreciate you being here today.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Clark. Very, very nice to be here.